Work hard, be nice, have an attitude of gratitude, and never give up. Tactics change, principles don't. So those four principles, if you keep those as your pillars and you go with a you above all else and you're in a relationship building business, and that will get you through the ups and downs of real estate.
Welcome back to The Agents Who Crush It in Real Estate, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of the most successful and inspiring figures in the real estate world. I'm your host, Lindsay Favazza, and today I'm thrilled to introduce you to an incredible individual who symbolizes resilience, dedication, and success in the real estate world. Our guest today is Andy Perenick, broker of Berkshire Dream Home Real Estate in Dalton, Massachusetts. He is a former police officer who made a bold career shift and emerged as a successful real estate broker. Andy's journey is not just about switching paths. It's about embracing change, leveraging skills from one field to another, and ultimately achieving success in the real estate world. He's dedicated to providing top-notch service, and his passion lies in helping others realize their dreams within the industry, which is why he is here with us today. Throughout this episode, Andy will share his insights, experiences, and strategies that have propelled him to the top of his game. So whether you're a seasoned realtor looking for a fresh perspective or an aspiring agent who's eager to learn from the best, Andy's story is bound to inspire and empower you to crush it in real estate. Without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast today, Andy.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm so excited that we finally made this work. We had some little hiccups and headaches between you, and we're finally here. So it was all meant to be. We're about to have a solar eclipse as well. So when you listen to this, it'll be weeks after, but pretty crazy day today.
Well, and then if the universe comes to an end, like some are predicting, we'll never have to watch this. Nobody will see it. And this is our special time together here today, Lindsay.
If this is the last person that we get, yeah, it's crazy. You know, we thought that back in like the 2000 when everything switched over. And then the next day we woke up and everything was exactly the same. So I have no doubt that that's how it'll end up today.
Me too.
So let's start with your origin story. Let's go back to the beginning. You were a police officer. How long ago was that? And what was your transition into real estate?
Excellent. So grew up in Winchester, Massachusetts, graduated back in 1994 as a sachem, which no longer exists there, but went off to St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire as a criminal justice major. Got a part-time job for the Hampton, New Hampshire Police Department. And when I graduated, they sent me off to the State Police Academy and went back to Hampton and worked a total of 5 years in New Hampshire, and then came down and worked in my hometown of Winchester, Massachusetts as a police officer for 4 more years. So that was how it started. I come from a family of law enforcement and military. My older brother, Dan, just retired from the Winchester Police Department a couple of years ago after, I believe it was 33 and a half years. So wow. I got to work with him for 4 years and had a lot of great experiences that ultimately we'll talk about rolled into helping with real estate.
Yeah. So when did you get licensed?
So I actually received my license in 2004. That's the same year that I retired early from the Winchester Police Department. So September 1st, 2004 was my first official day not having a paycheck and going right from, that quote, safe paycheck as a union civil servant in Massachusetts to 100% commission sales. Ooh.
I think it's ironic that you call being a police officer a safe paycheck. To me, that would be like, oh God.
Well, the paycheck's safe and secure. Sometimes you're not always going to be there in one piece to collect it. Yes. So.
Yikes. So what was your thought process back then of getting your real estate? Were you excited because now you had the opportunity to really focus on it? Was this something that you always kind of thought would be kind of your retirement job, or what was the thought process there?
It's amazing. I mean, when I reflect back on it now, so I had a supervisor on the police department who was very much into investing in real estate. I also had a father who had invested a little bit in real estate. And then I married into a family where my father-in-law was the broker owner of a RE/MAX franchise out in the beautiful Berkshires. So I'm hearing about all this. And then one day my sergeant gives me a book or mentions about a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I read that book. And for me, that was that, whoa. And then I read the Flow Quadrant, the second book. And then I really started to It was funny. My friends would make fun of me because back in the day, it was the little yellow Casio cassette player. And I
Yep.
had the audio speakers that were like this big, and I had them seat belted in the front of the cruiser in case I had to go real fast. They wouldn't go falling all over the place. And I would be listening to people like Robert Kiyosaki. I'd be listening to people like Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn, because that's when I first started to get introduced in this. I also had a little side business in a company called Advocare out of Carrollton, Texas, that was teaching me sales as well. It was a nutritional supplement company. So it was interesting how kind of all these paths merged, and Andy started to become a little bit more enlightened. I was in the half of the class in school that made the top half possible, as my father-in-law used to say. So formal education, I got through with personality relationships, maybe painting a few professors' houses and babysitting some kids to get through some college classes. Meanwhile, we'll talk about my wife in a little bit, but she was the one that was in the library studying, saying, "You can't paint the professor's house and get a better grade." And I said, "Well, you might be right." So that's when I realized, make a friend before you need one, and build relationships. That's the core of what we're going to be chatting about today, I think.
Make a friend before you need one. I love that. That is such a great. Is that from you? Is that just a quote? Whose quote is that?
So I quote my grandmother a lot. So my grandmother had a lot of wonderful quotes, and that's what I attribute to her.
I love that. That's amazing. So you start out, you're freshly retired. Now you got your license. What happens next?
Wow. So 2004, I didn't close a thing. We actually went on a nice family trip to Italy, like in October, November. I had my first closing in 2005. Officially, I was a buyer specialist on the Al Gelinas real estate team. That was my father-in-law's name. And I was one of two buyer's agents. He had an assistant, and he was just the top realtor in all of Berkshire County by far. He had a moving truck, television commercials. I mean, he did it up. He was like the Anthony LaMacchia before Anthony came along, as far as all that stuff.
I love it.
So I came on board, and basically, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. You passed that 40-hour class, and I knew that I trusted him, and I knew that he was a good guy, and he was all about raising the bar for professionalism in the industry. So I knew I was jumping from one good thing into another. And the main reason for the move was a quality of life move. I love Winchester. I love that area. The cost of living out there was getting crazy. My wife at the time was a school psychologist. I was a police officer making fairly good money. But we looked at the future and just realized, wow. And back out in the Berkshires at the time, the prices have gone up a bunch since COVID especially. But it was an uncharted little area that was just, I call it the beautiful Berkshires. And it was only a couple hours from Boston. Being from Boston, everyone went to Maine or New Hampshire, down the Cape. Very few people went west. And that's where a lot of people from New York and New Jersey come to. And it was just a wonderful quality of life, affordable houses. Came out here as a buyer's agent, just did what my father-in-law told me to do. He brought me to Howard Britton's Star Power back in the day. I get to meet Howard out in San Francisco. It was a really cool thing. That was my first official training, like live training, which was wild. My father-in-law was a big believer in that. So it just all started to come together as far as learning real estate. It's never fun to do something new, honestly, even though I'm I don't mind making transitions. To go from someone who spent almost a decade in law enforcement, riding motorcycles and, being a supervisor, certain shifts, to the lowest person on the totem pole in the office, not knowing which form to fill out and what to say to buyers. And I didn't even work with sellers at the time. So it was a difficult transition, but I was optimistic at some point it would click and I'd start to do something successful.
So when do you think it started to click? What was that moment? Do you have a moment, or was it like, no, it just kind of over time, all of a sudden I was like, wait, now I'm just doing this thing?
Well, it's an unfortunate, not per se moment, but what happened is my father-in-law, Al, within about 2 years, maybe a little less than 2 years after me coming on board, he had a massive stroke at 52 years old. So here he is, 52 years old. I'm married to his oldest daughter. It was in 06 now, going into 07. The market for us out here was we were at the top, but we didn't know it yet. You don't know until it starts to go down. Well, as he was laying in a hospital bed with severe stroke symptoms that he recovered enough from, he's still alive today, but was unable to really continue his real estate world. Here I am, a buyer specialist, trying to now be a listing specialist, because that was his thing. So a number of people now fondly look back and call me Bad News Andy, because every time I had to call, it was bad news for the seller, and I'm trying to relay it from my father-in-law. So here I am, a buyer specialist, still new in real estate,
Still
and
trying to
now I got
figure
to
it
work
out.
with sellers, and the sellers, it wasn't good news, and the market was starting to slide. So around that time, that's when a good friend of mine who's a lender in my building right now with Guild Mortgage, Jamie Pollard, he said, Andrew, he says, if you can stake your flag in the ground now in a down market with your father-in-law having taken a hard turn, life being crazy, real estate being crazy. He says, if you do it now, he goes, when the tide comes back, you'll be very successful. And to this day, all of that kind of came together. And that's when I started to get introduced to Brian Buffini. And that's where, Howard Britton at that point had retired, and then he had a stroke and passed away. So I jumped into the Brian Buffini coaching program. And those were my rumble strips to make sure I didn't smash into the guardrail on this crazy highway called real estate sales.
Do you think because of your, because of your background of being a police officer, having very much kind of that like military style, like learning style, right? Where it's like you have to learn exactly what it is you're supposed to do. Do you think that training has become a huge important thing to you? Like a lot of agents, I think they're like, I'll figure it out kind of as I go. But it sounds like you more have like from the very beginning really taken and adapted to training and getting training.
Adapt is the word. And, one of the special forces mottos is you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to your level of training.
Yeah.
So we have a saying around here that, you train during peacetime so you don't bleed during war. And, with things going on in the marketplace right now, this is what we train for. This is what you never know when it's going to come. This is real estate. There's always something that's going to come at you, just like law enforcement. They train you in the academy on all these wacky things that most of them never happened to me, but they train you because it has happened to somebody else. So training is huge. If you don't train, think of Tom Brady back when he was playing. He was the best, and yet he still would go to practice because he couldn't just show up on Sunday and just huck the ball down the field.
Yep. And I think it's really important to think about, especially now. So like you said, you don't know that it's a down market until it starts to go down. I think we can officially say like we're on that slide, right? So it's starting to happen again. So, I'm sure that you and the agents within your brokerage are probably feeling a little bit of peace knowing that you have been through a down market before. Probably one of the right when you were starting and like having to like start that way is probably really a good experience that you had. And then on top of that, like you said, the fact that you've been training for these types of things. I mean, I don't know if we could have thought that all of the things that are happening right now would have happened, but we're prepared as far as buyer agency and things like that happen. I think for the most part, there's a lot of brokerages that aren't prepared, but do you feel that you guys are set up for success at this point with the real estate climate the way it is?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think, I don't know the statistic, but I think, well, I won't even get into it, but the bottom line is this. When I got in with Brian Buffini, he also introduced me to Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey's the debt-free guy. And if people out there haven't turned into him or haven't talked about or learned about his 7 baby steps, let me tell you, Brian Buffini's father used to always say, when you're on the mountaintop, throw a little dirt in the valley, it'll soften your fall. And Dave Ramsey talks about the rainy day fund, grandma's rainy day fund. And when people say, Dave, you need to be more positive than, talking about this stuff, he says, I'm positive it's going to rain. And here's yet another example of if, hopefully you paid off all your debts when the checks were flying and things were crazy. And we did. So we are a debt-free company. My wife and I own a pile of rental properties and a boat rental business out here in the summertime on one of the local lakes, one of our fun, happy businesses that we've taught our 2 boys about business through that boat rental company as well. And it's all debt-free. So when you have that, you have options. So, I train my agents on this, and eventually when they watch this, they'll nod their head going, I should have listened to maybe a little bit more. And I know some have that same feeling of peace, because when you're up to your eyeballs in debt, boy, and there's an adjustment, it's a tough industry to be in. And I know that there's a lot of brokers who are not terrific with their finances, and it doesn't take much to make, upset the apple cart.
Absolutely. So you transition, you start to take over more and more responsibility. Well, what happens after that? What happens next? What happens when the market started to shift? What kind of changes did you have to make?
So I got to tell you, one of the things that I really reflect back on that helped me eventually become a great listing agent, the top listing agent in this area at the time, was because of my time with buyers. Because at the end of the day, if you really think about it, if you're a listing agent, what are you trying to help the seller catch? If you're going fishing, you're trying to catch a buyer. And if you're out in the ocean, right? I grew up on the Nantasket Beach in Hull in the summertime. You're not going out with a light little line, a tiny little hook, and a piece of Wonder Bread like you might on Wedge Pond, in the Winchester Woburn area. So you have to understand what you're trying to catch. So to have through the eyes of buyers, that's how we teach. And when I was working with sellers, and I teach the agents now, when you're working with a seller, think of it, tell them to turn their hat around backwards or something so that they try to think about, what are we trying to do? I know you want this for the house. I know you think it's worth this, but at the end of the day, there's two types of homes, sold and overpriced. And not all sellers can handle that smack right in the face on your first time. And even Anthony talks about it. I remember him back in the beginning, and he was, you'll never get that, and again, we all soften the ones that learn soften a little bit and start to realize, listen, when I meet with a seller or I'm training an agent, can this seller handle this? Well, most of them can't. So you have to walk the path a little bit. You have to ask them the questions. You have to do everything Anthony trains about as well, and Brian Buffini trains, build the relationship. At the end of the day, we're in a relationship building business, and that's why we have our motto, you above all else. My wife and I, as the owners of the company, we're doing that for our agents so that they can then turn that around and make that for their buyers and sellers so that they are there above all else and get the most professional service. So I know I can get off track, so I'll pause, take a sip, and you can redirect me.
No, that's okay. I actually want to redirect to your wife because you talked a little bit about that and how wonderful she is. And I know you had mentioned she not only works for the company, but obviously she is very high up in the company. So tell me about how she got involved and how that transition happened into having her more in the business. Now, you had said that she was working as a school counselor. So how did she get into real estate? Was that around the same time that you kind of got into it?
That's a good one too. So my wife's name is Sarah, and she's currently our chief financial officer and chief operating officer. And she was trained. We both went to St. Anselm College up in Manchester, New Hampshire. She was a year behind me. We got married right after she got out of college and graduated because I knew she was the one. And that was my greatest sale in life that's helped everything go smooth since then. And bottom line is she was a school psychologist, both out in the Boston area. And then when we came out here, she worked for the Pittsfield Public Schools. Eventually, just for a quality of life for her, transitioned to a classroom teacher. And then my original assistant, who's back with me now, her name is Michelle. She had a late in life pregnancy. And she said, I can't work and take care of this kid. I'm too old. I don't have enough energy. So when Michelle left, that's right when Berkshire Dream Home was beginning. And we just celebrated our 10th anniversary this past April 1st, just a few days ago. Thank you.
Congrats.
So at that point, I said, oh man, we're growing in leaps and bounds. I need someone that can handle paperwork, finances, everything. So my wife was fortunate enough that the school system gave her a 1-year leave of absence, and she never went back. So basically, she is the systems and process and Excel spreadsheet person. I could ask her, hey, Sarah, about, how many transactions do we have? And she's like, where's my laptop? I'm like, no, just give me an approximate. And she's like, I don't speak.
It has to be perfect.
Yeah. So which is great because I'm all day approximates. I'm like, yeah, something like that.
It's something around this.
Yeah. So Sarah is amazing, and Sarah is how we went from pretty much a small, tiny little office with 3 or 4 agents to we just hit 30 a couple months ago. A little attrition, which happens. That's part of life, and now we're climbing back.
Especially now.
Yeah, just brought on a new agent this morning. Did some training here as well. So we're still rocking and rolling and trying to find those right agents that want to do the right thing for buyers and sellers.
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely a transitional period right now, and not just for the actual clients, like as far as the market goes, but there's going to be a very large exodus of realtors from the business right now, which, there was a large surplus a couple years ago. So I think that it's kind of a healthy cleanse. You know what I mean?
Well, another Brian Buffiniism. He says all the time, even a turkey can fly in a hurricane. And that's what we've had. We've had people that have tried to come into this industry, but unfortunately didn't join a brokerage that had great training, and they didn't get great training, so they fell out of the sky. And then you had other people that were just in this for other reasons, so quicker money, easier deals, because sometimes it looks easy. Then
it was for a little while.
Well, it almost never is. Every so often you get like one, and you're like, okay, that's enough to get me to not quit this week, right? Because honestly, we're dealing with people, and that's why one of my favorite books is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, because that's the book on people, and the most difficult thing to deal with in this life are people. So that book really is, if you haven't read it before, put it in your personal library. If you've read it before, go open it again tonight, because it's great for relationships, buyers, sellers, money grubbing attorneys that try to sue our industry.
We know a lot about that. So what is it that you guys do? How do you form your training? How do you get agents started with your company? Like, what kind of is like that onboarding, and what does that process look like? Because, quite often on this podcast, we have agents, but from a broker perspective, I think it's really important to, for anyone else that's either out there thinking about starting a brokerage, or someone who is a broker owner and wants to learn from others, what is it that you do to get agents into the company and then, get them onboarded quickly?
So this is something where not only, my coach over 14 years with Buffini and Company, but also Anthony Lamacchia. I met Anthony when I was the president of the Berkshire County MLS. We were down in New Orleans years ago now, 12 or 13, 14 years ago. We were, I think, waiting for a taxi together. I looked at him. He didn't know who I was, but I said, Anthony, yeah, how you doing? And I introduced myself and all this stuff, and we got to chatting about how I was from Winchester, and he was not far from there, and we just stayed in contact. Again, grandma, make a friend before you need one. So over the years, I would reach out to Anthony. He came out here a couple times now, and he's always like, man, I never knew this place really existed. I thought this was New York by now. Honestly, we're an hour west of Springfield. Most people don't realize there is an hour's worth of Massachusetts west of Springfield. So long story short, Anthony and I stayed in contact, and at different points when I knew I had to make a transition from, being an independent agent to a team, and then from a team to a brokerage, he is the reason I changed from a team leader to a brokerage. But we have a very hybrid model here at Berkshire Dream Home. So in 2020, I stopped working with buyers and sellers. I hadn't worked with buyers for a while. I had a team. And, Anthony talked about scale and talked about, you got to commit. And out here, there's a lot of brokers who still have to go out to work every day with buyers and sellers to pay the bills. Yeah. And my wife and I are very conservative because of that Dave Ramsey stuff we talked about, so that we could make a transition. Because anytime you make a transition like this, you're going to make less money. So we made less money, but we knew it was going to happen. We prepared for it. And then I just focused on training and then recruiting. So when people come on board here, I'm that literally 300-pound gorilla. I'm just over 300 pounds right now. I'm working on that. That's one of the 5 circles of Buffini health, and that's what I'm refocusing on for 2024.
I love it.
Long story short, the goal, I tell our agents, listen, we're going to give you great training, but at the end of the day, you can't train for everything. So I'm one phone call away. Be that dog that starts barking and running after the car. When the car stops, the dog goes, whoa, what do I do now? I said, that's when you look back and whistle to me, and I'll help you. I'll give you the words to win by. And then what we've done over the years is we've trained other agents so they know what to say, what not to say. My wife, Sarah, has created amazing systems, with our staff. And we're fortunate enough, Michelle's now been back with us for years. So is the office manager. And Doug and Jessica, my OGs, the original folks here with us as well. They've been on the leadership team, and we've grown and tried to, help and share. And basically, I reached my goals when it came to sales and real estate. Now we're attempting to help other people reach their goals with programs like we do still run 100 Days to Greatness that Buffini puts out. We just ran a Pathways to Mastery Advanced series that literally just ended this past week. So every week there's a training, usually 2 times a week. When the whole proposed NAR settlement came out, we had 3 trainings in 5 days just to get the facts, to get the facts. And I hope everybody's comfortable that we know what we're doing. We are comfortable that we know what we're doing,
Yep.
but we don't exactly know what's going to happen next, but we're already improvising and overcoming. And that's really, I think, the key.
Yep. So you've already given so much great advice, but if you were to boil things down into one piece of advice, especially like I said, for more of the broker owner audience or someone looking to be a broker owner, what kind of advice would you give them? Is it, what would you say to focus on, or what would you say they need to possess before they really make that switch over?
So I'll give you a couple things. I'll give you some generalities, this is what I said. I have two boys. One's just getting ready to graduate, UMass, Amherst, Eisenberg, sport management. He just got hired by the Atlanta Hawks. So he's going to go down there and work in their sales department. My youngest boy is a freshman, and he is running track for Division I UMass Amherst as a decathlete. So, these kids are squared away. I tell people all the time, I married up and she trained them well. So that was part of that's why
you had a little bit to do with it. I'm sure your wife is as wonderful as you say, but you had a little bit. Give yourself some credit.
Oh, listen, it's okay. It's okay. Yes, I had a little bit to do with it, but what I would send the boys out the door with is almost every day, and they could repeat it right now. And eventually, because I'll make them watch this, I do that sometimes because it's good for them. Damn it.
Yeah.
Right? But with the four things we always talked about was work hard, be nice, have an attitude of gratitude, and never give up.
I love that.
So those four, we talk all the time about tactics change, principles don't. So those four principles, if that's, where your heart is, and I know I'm talking maybe to a whole bunch of different people and different mindsets, but if that speaks true to you, then if you keep those as your pillars and you go with a you above all else, and you're in a relationship building business, and that will get you through the ups and downs of real estate. So those four principles are very important. And that's what we sent the boys out the door with. As far as detailed stuff, you just, people talk about this is a professional agent's market right now. Mm-hmm. And it's true. If you're just kind of winging it, you're either going to dial in or it's time to step out. And that's okay. When I first got into the business, there were, at the height of it, was almost 700 agents in our little MLS out here, Berkshire County Board. And then in the lowest times, it was like 325. So, half. And that happens. That's an industry that we're in. It happens, and it's okay. I remember being at a Buffini event one time, and one of the coach people said, listen, because of your coaching, I'm opting to retire now or get out now because I don't have the energy for the next go round. I've done it. Thank you for your guidance. And everybody clapped, probably because they're like, I should probably go with you because this is crazy. But, we're prepared now to whatever it is. We're going to be like the buffalo. Ready for another great quote?
I love it. I love it. I want to write all of these down. You have the best analogies.
But the buffalo, I guess, is the only animal that when a big storm's coming, it races into the storm to get through it faster as opposed to running away from it and being tired and destroyed by it. So
wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, you might check it out and it might be totally wrong, but I heard it and it stuck. So.
You said it with all the confidence in the world, so I fully believed it.
Unburdened by doubt. That term has been thrown around before. So, yeah, but the bottom line is, if you're looking to start a brokerage, I would say don't. Not right now. There's a lot of, honestly, and I'm saying that being honest with someone who's, now listen, I'm just a little small brokerage here with just under 30 people between licensed agents and admin. And we've been churning and burning with goals in mind and coaching and everything else to go out on your own. If you haven't read it, read the book, The E-Myth. There's even one for real estate brokerages. But the E-Myth, which stands for the entrepreneur's myth, talks about people that, listen, you might be a great realtor. And I was a great realtor. I was a great team leader. We did 150 some odd transactions as a 3-person team. And now Berkshire Dream Home does well over 300 a year and growing. But if you read that E-Myth book, and I learned this a little bit the hard way, but with Anthony's coaching, it's a whole different set of skills. Just because you think you can sell, leading people is a whole different learning experience. It's a whole different set of tools. Yeah. And that E-Myth really talks about it. If you're interested in it, read that book. And if you're not a reader of books, never open your own brokerage because leaders are readers. Yeah. Someone once said that to me and it stuck. And I hated to read in school, but boy, I've read more books, or my wife would joke right now, I've read more parts and chapters of books, maybe not the whole thing, but gotten the ideas, listen to the books online. We drive a lot,
I do that. Yep. That's
and
how
listen to
that's
some
how
of
I
these
read all my books.
Yeah, and then have the book in there because there's some great stuff to highlight, to flip back to when you need it, when you really got to focus. But so that E-Myth book is powerful because it puts you in your place, which is, listen, not everybody, even if you're a good agent, not all people are created to become brokers and owners, and it's a whole different world. Not saying don't do it, but educate yourself before you make that jump, because if you don't, you're gonna find yourself in a tough spot.
And Anthony just did a video the other day where he talked about, like, if you do want to do it, just step in slowly, like lean into it a little bit before you jump in, because otherwise, you could be stuck, and you don't want to kill the love that you might have for real estate either, where it can put you back and now you're like, I'm just out completely, or that it could financially strain you enough that you would have to get out. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that was really solid advice. Like, don't do it unless you're absolutely ready to do it. I think that's what they should hear.
Yeah, and there's some good companies out there, and I'll toot our horn a little bit here, because through looking at other people's models, we've come up with a model that my own father-in-law said. He bought a Remax franchise back in the day because he was the top agent. He needed something else to kind of, he kind of built that franchise, if you will. And he said, Andy, if there was a company like yours at the time, because he loved to sell, he would never ever give up, working with sellers. And me, I was happy to after a certain period of time. It was just a natural progression.
Yeah.
And he said, boy, if there was a company like yours with everything we have going on, he goes, I would have stayed and I would have grown my team as big as I wanted right under the umbrella. And I know Anthony and I have similar business models and philosophies, which is nice. Grow your own company within the company and protection of somebody else's. Because when you try to do your own, wow, errors and omissions insurance, if you haven't dealt with it yet or had a lawsuit,
yikes. There's a lot involved. Andy, this was so much fun. I really enjoyed talking to you. I really enjoyed hearing your stories. I definitely want to do like a catch-up episode later on for sure, because I feel like we just scratched the surface.
Well, listen, this was fun. And has it been 5 minutes? Have I already talked for 5 minutes?
It's been 30 minutes. Like, that's insane. It felt like it was 2 minutes.
Yep. Someone once said I could talk a dog off a meat wagon. That's what they said. I believe it.
You definitely are good at what you do, my friend. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's listening. I'm usually really terrible at this, but let's see. There's his social media right there. I usually am completely opposite, not knowing where I'm pointing. There's his social if you're watching here on YouTube. Otherwise, check out the show notes and make sure to grab his contact info. He is a wealth of knowledge and an open book. He actually told me in the beginning, put my cell phone number down there. I'm like, oh, we're not going to do that, but we'll put it in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to him, ask him questions. He's a blast to talk to and also a wealth of knowledge. So Andy, thank you again so much. And thank you to all of our listeners. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, listen, it was a pleasure, and I'm not joking. Text or call, and I'll just sign off with what one of my Amish friends, again, make a friend before you need one, says, and he says, have a great day or enjoy the bad one.
I love it. Well, hopefully we see each other after this. The eclipse doesn't end the world for us today. I appreciate it. This was a great convo, though, so I would go out happy. It's fine. It's all good.
Thank you. Same here.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it. We'll see you guys on the next episode of The Agents Who Crush It in Real Estate.
Thank you for tuning in to the Agents Who Crush It in Real Estate podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with your friends and colleagues, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you're interested in being a guest, email us at info@crushitinre.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to crush it in real estate.